up and the drool's coming out of your mouth, you're like, oh,
Whatever, it's not a wrap.
get that out. Got to the point where I had to rest on
Right.
But my undergraduate 2 weeks online, so I didn't learn it.
Yeah. That'd be like best
Good wall sits.
Yeah, I didn't learn it though.
They were asking for it at that point.
It's just, you're full 92, man.
Oh, I didn't even have to
I
have
think
it.
they have to do a 60 on 90X. They don't even
Right.
want to anymore.
I don't like it. But there's no way you can
Ninety's the hardest.
Straight right now, a lot of them are weeks.
On the P90X thing, they make you do 1-footers, and I can't. I have to do like 45.
Straight out.
Oh my god, it's done.
I know, I told you.
Wakes you up
A
though.
lot of them are really happy.
Yeah, I think
You've done all of it.
I might have to get
Feel smart.
in 10 minutes.
But it was funny, we always like you though, this is like the speed, right?
Go play
No,
some
that's right. Which is your favorite?
I heard that we're taking that one. Because Dr. McNeil said if we put up a third one, then it's not even, then I have to put up a fourth one.
It was uneven the first year we went.
Sounds like
Why can't we just put it back here?
he said we can't get another one.
I know how that got. I thought we need to pay for put up pictures, because we need
Yeah,
places,
it's like
so.
good Wednesday.
I can't imagine you all looking at it every day.
Cause see, like you could, like the winner made up the rules, like you could bobble or whatever, you know.
They need to have someone come in here and like do the walls, like your brains.
I know, it's like without.
Maybe like yellow.
But you can't.
They chalk
Kind of like, you can like block it and then control its motion. We call it bobble.
Larry?
Oh, yeah. Let me see.
outline.
Okay guys, we've got like 5 minutes.
But. So we put.
The only thing is that.
Me too, except for I can't.
Oh, where's that?
It's like kind of every once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about
We had one on recess, so.
I always make the trick kids with the angle.
Yeah, that's what I.
Yeah, we would never like catch it, and then like,
I just wanted to push it there.
because like if you go too wide, then it doesn't wrap around the pole.
Yeah. You hit it over the person over there, and then it comes down.
And you're like 3rd grade, you can hit that angle, where you can't jump up and get the ball.
I didn't write that.
Like one time.
Yeah, you did.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, because you're good. Why?
I wasn't like this.
You're just the tricky one.
Maybe if you freak out, it'll get like.
Yeah, kids like you made me go to the teeter totter.
Copy over.
Just sit there. Screw that guy. It's gonna be an introvert.
I even just tried to email it. Did it not work? All my it's not showing up. And it's doing it. And then I didn't do that. Yeah, you don't understand.
Maybe.
Oh, he's doing
Wakes you up when your thighs in a jelly.
Guess what I still want to that next time? Like, I know, like, the one comes through. Yes, yes. I'm excited. It got delivered.
Because all my money. Outside those systems. Yeah, try that.
I I really want some gummy worms. Or I'm sorry, I
Oh, no,
really
you're
want
Okay, let's get started.
Gummy worms sound good.
sour gummy worms. Those are amazing. No. I don't know why I'm choosing sour gummy worms. Are you talking about the well, it's not
Okay, let's get started. So I'm gonna end this and then I'll do peds and geriatrics too tomorrow. It's hard to sit there, it's hard to talk for 5 hours. This is probably an unusual PowerPoint. I tended to do more summary. Would you like me to print it out as the outline?
I like the
I like the outline.
I actually like
I like
that.
whatever you're gonna test though.
But I have summarized it in I mean, it's up to you. If you don't want, you're okay. Okay. Because I see some of you like, where is she?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't do that very often.
Can you post it? That one?
Post it as an outline? I can print it off if you'd like.
Yes,
an outline.
I would prefer like.
Yeah, because I'm really.
It's all there. It's just
Yeah.
follow. I don't do it very often. I don't know why I chose to do it.
No, this is really cute.
I like it.
What?
That's okay.
But it's,
Why is it-
I know it's confusing.
You're finding out?
Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, so biotransformation. So the chemical conversion of a drug through an enzyme-mediated system. So most drugs are metabolized by enzymes in the liver to another chemical entity, and we call that a metabolite. Important word. Almost all. Some are excreted unchanged, and a lot of drugs are to an extent excreted unchanged. Most drugs are converted into something else, and we call that a metabolite. Metabolites can be inactive, they can be active. Some metabolites have great activity. They may have as much activity as the parent compound. Most metabolites are inactive. They don't have any activity. They're just inert now, and we're just waiting for the kidneys to get rid of them. So it's important to know drugs that have active metabolites, because once they've been converted by the liver to be an active metabolite, then we're dependent on the kidneys to get rid of them. If the kidney function is poor, then their pharmacologic effect is very long. Okay? So almost all drugs undergo some kind of conversion by the liver to a substance we call generically a metabolite. They can be active, they can be inactive. If they're active, we are dependent on now the end of action to be the kidneys. Okay? Important concept. So a lot of the organs can transform a drug. The lungs have that capacity. The lungs can metabolize drugs into other forms. The gut can do it to an extent. The kidneys can do it to an extent. But the major organ is the liver. So when you think of drug metabolism, think liver. So knowing what a patient's liver function is would be important. Liver has huge capacity, huge. You can lose 80 to 90% of it before you ever see your bleeding times go up. Your clotting factors go down enough that you are now at risk for bleeding. So huge capacity. So most of the time, we don't get in trouble with the liver and metabolism, usually. Where we get into trouble is more the kidneys. Because kidney function declines, can't get rid of drugs, they stay around longer. Side effects are more prominent. Pharmacologic effects is stronger. So this, I got ahead of myself with the first pass effect, but this shows you, just reminds us. So drugs have to go through, that we ingest orally, go through the gut, have to go through the liver. And so first pass effect has significant effects on how much drug reaches systemic circulation. Systemic circulation is where drugs then are available to move into tissues. Okay. So in the liver has two big types of changes it will make to a drug. We call them phase 1 reactions, phase 2 reactions. So phase 1 converts the drug into a water-soluble metabolite. Not all drugs undergo. Some undergo phase 1 and phase 2. Some undergo just phase 1. Some undergo just phase 2. Usually these are inactive metabolites, usually. Sometimes they will undergo then another transformation by phase 2 reactions. These are where we will join them with another substance like glucuronide, amino acid, and we'll make them very polar and, again, more easily eliminated by the kidneys. The enzymatic portion of the liver, and I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow, I'll just bring it up, is that there are enzymes that are responsible, and they are called as a family the P450 system. It's a very important system, and it metabolizes most of our drugs that we have. Drug interactions that occur because of changes or impacts of these enzymes. I'm going to move it to tomorrow because we're going to talk about drug interactions a little bit more involved. We're going to talk about these until you're sick of hearing them because they're so common, especially the 3A4. They are the largest of the enzyme systems, and many agents interact with them. To interact, it could be that another drug could inhibit the ability of those enzymes to work. They could another drug could serve as a substrate, so it competes with the enzyme, so less is metabolized. Or it can speed up the metabolism, it can speed up the rate of the enzymes. Okay? So we can block enzymes from working, we can speed them up, or we can compete with them as a substrate. Those are the three ways that we interfere with enzymes and cause drug interactions. That's the basis of most drug interactions. Other factors that affect metabolism are what happens to other organs that affect then the liver and the kidneys. So heart disease can affect the liver. So if the heart isn't working, then the liver gets congested. And if the liver gets congested and backed up with fluid or pressure increases, the enzymes do not work as well. And so metabolism and clearance of a drug will go down. Concurrent medications, we're going to hit this every time we go through. The biggest thing you're going to learn in the next year is look it up, look it up, look it up. Especially for high-risk drugs. I will point out high-risk drugs to you all the time. The ones that you have to look up. There's a handful of them, but they can cause you significant trouble. Grapefruit juice is a big problem in terms of the liver. It interferes with enzymes. It can interfere with the metabolism of drugs. So we'll talk about it as we go through, especially cardiac drugs, and that patients shouldn't drink grapefruit juice. Other is smoking and alcohol. Smoking is amazing. This will go the same for marijuana. They rev up enzymes. I mean, drugs that are metabolized through enzymes that smoking affects, they can eat up a drug faster than you can put it into their system. Not very many, but a few. Alcohol tends to blunt or, well, I shouldn't say that. Alcohol has two weird effects. If let's say you drink a lot one night, the next day those enzymes can be highly blunted. And so, I'll give you an example with Coumadin, with warfarin. If you're taking warfarin as a blood thinner or an anticoagulant and you drink a lot of alcohol one night, the next day, your bleeding time will go way up because you have just stunned those enzymes that are working with the warfarins affecting. But if you're a drinker, moderate drinker, and you drink all the time, you rev up those enzymes. If you drink heavily and you destroy liver tissue, you blunt those enzymes. So alcohol is a really weird player. It depends on how much and for what length of time. Short bursts tend to have their effect. Low amount chronically has its effect, and large amounts long-term have a different effect. So alcohol is really a difficult one to deal with when you're dealing with binge drinkers or alcoholics or just maybe low-grade alcoholics. Fever and infection and inflammation will all have an effect on metabolism. So a fever can really either blunt the ability to metabolize, or it can rev it up, rev up metabolism. Any stress on the body will tend to affect metabolic capacity. So you may see, particularly drugs that are very sensitive to changes in the activity of a liver enzymes, you may see levels go up or effects go down. Age, well, with aging comes differences in metabolic capacity. We see it the most in kids. So from birth to 1 year of age, the kids' livers are still developing. When they hit about 1 to about 9, they can eat up anything. A lot of drugs they can just chew through, and so they may require higher doses per body weight than an adult. Then they start to hit puberty, and as they go through teenage years and head towards being an adult, they tend to move more to adult levels. So with kids, you really have to know for certain drugs what age they are, because it will have an impact on their metabolic capacity. It may be slow, too low, like with an infant, very high with a young child, and then as they are getting to an adult, it moves in that direction. Body composition. So sometimes how heavy you are will have an effect on metabolic capacity, or it'll have a capacity on, or it'll have an effect on lipid soluble drugs. It has an effect on how much drug we'll give somebody. Sometimes now that we've got people that are very obese, sometimes we don't know how to dose them. And sometimes we can't dose them enough to get effect. So body composition can affect. Cancer. Cancer does all kinds of weird stuff to metabolism. They rev it up, may produce substances that interfere, or they lose metabolic capacity. So those are the common ones. Questions about those? Excretion. Permanently getting rid of the drug. Okay. Metabolism may have been activated, but it's still there, but it can't cause any effect. This is getting it all the way. Liver and kidney, major role. Kidney really plays prominent here. Multiple organs, again, can be involved in metabolism. Clearance of the drug is the process that results in all drug removal. So you'll see the term clearance used a lot. We use it somewhat interchangeably with elimination. So the clearance of a drug, it can be mathematically determined based on the level of the drug and the dose that we gave over time. Since I can't play this, I would recommend you go through, watch this video. It's about 3.5 minutes. They did a really good job, and the guy, I think this one is the one that has a great British accent. You know, they've decided that British accents are what people want to hear on YouTube. So this takes the drug from somebody ingesting it all the way to, and they go through all these, all the different organs and all the different processes, and it's well done. It'll keep you entertained. It's 3.5 minutes long, so I would highly recommend that. Okay, half-life. Half-life is an important concept we're going to talk about a lot. So half-life is the time that it takes for half the amount of drug that's in the body to be eliminated. Okay, so if I start with 100% of drug, and the time it takes to get to 50% of the drug in the body is 1 half-life. We designate it this way. T, small t with a half. Okay? That is 1 half-life. To go from 50% to 25%, that's another half-life. To go from 25% to 12.5%, that's another half-life. To go from 12.5 to 6.25, that's another half-life. And this takes us down to 3.215, that's 5 half-lives. Whoops. Okay. In order to get a drug to where it is, let's see. There shows you. Another's in here. Okay, so this picture. When we get to steady state is where incoming and outgoing are in equilibrium. So the peaks and troughs are staying within about the same amount all the time. Okay. This is an important concept, very important. It takes about 5 half-lives to get to steady state. Some people will also define it as 3.3. Because you're about 90% there when you get to 3.3 half-lives. Okay? So that tells me that if a drug has like levothyroxine for the thyroid, has a half-life of 7 days. So how long does it take it to get to steady state? 35 days. Okay? That means that in order for me to assess how that dose affects their TSH, I got to wait about 5 weeks. If I do it earlier than that, let's say I did it after 1 week, then I'd raise the dose. I'd overdose them eventually. Antibiotics, we use this all the time. We will load a patient. We'll give them big doses right off the bat to try to get them to steady state fast. Okay? So we use this concept all the time. The other thing is that when you're trying to get rid of a drug in the body, it's the same process. It takes 5 half-lives to get the drug out of the body. So I told you about amiodarone. It has a half-life of about 60 days. So when I'm trying to get to steady state, it's about 9 to 10 months. So it's a huge interactor with warfarin, an anticoagulant. So when I'm changing a dose, or if some cardiologist comes and puts them on amiodarone or decides to take them off, I have to initially do a change in dose of the warfarin because there'll be an initial. But then I have to wait, in about 2 months, I've got to make another change. I have to remember that because whether it's going up or down, the patient will get over or under coagulated. Okay? So the same amount of time to get to steady state is the same amount it takes to get rid of the drug. Important concept. I can guarantee you I will ask you about this. You have to understand this concept.
What's the difference between the 5 half-life and the 3.3? What are those different?
90 and 100%, close to 100%. So some people will say, at this point you're at 90%, you're there. So for some, like antibiotics and stuff, they'll use that as measuring peaks and troughs that we're near where we need to be. Okay. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just a little confused on that. I just want to make sure because I know someone else is too. In order to achieve a steady state of medication, the longer the half-life means the longer to achieve the steady state?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if a drug has a 1 hour half-life, 5 hours, if you're constantly dosing, it's there. Okay. So, yes, so the shorter the half-life, the other thing you'll see is that some hormones have, like insulin has a 9-minute half-life. Okay. So its action's very short. Okay. A lot of endogenous hormones have extremely short half-lives. So we'll take those drugs, or those endogenous substances, we'll manipulate them and we'll make them 24-hour half-lives. So we took the GLP, which is a normally occurring hormone, 9-minute half-life, and now we have drugs that are GLP agonists that last 24 hours. We have some that are 1 week. Okay. So we can do a lot to manipulate with that knowledge too. Other questions about this? So steady state, the in and the out are in equilibrium, okay? The peaks and troughs, the max and the minimum concentrations of that drug in the blood are pretty much staying the same. Okay? That's when you can most reliably assess the therapeutic effect of that drug to the dose you have given. Now, if the drug is in the body and you up the dose, then it doesn't take as many half-lives because you're already at a certain point. It may only take 2 or 3 half-lives to get to steady state, the next level. Okay. All right. Okay, linear and nonlinear kinetics. Okay. What's linear mean? Straight line up here. What's it have to do with proportionality?
There's a direct K value.
It's directly proportional. You raise it 5, it goes up 10%. You raise another 5, it goes up another 10%. So it's directly proportional. Every move you make has an equal effect or response. So this is linear kinetics. This is concentration in the blood. This is the amount of drug. Okay? So everything's proportional. Oops. The slope of that line is steady, doesn't vary. That's linear kinetics. Okay? So for every dose change, you get a change in concentration in the blood. Okay? So great, it's predictable. I know if I give this dose, I'm going to get this response. If I give this amount, I'm going to get this amount in the blood concentration. Well, not all drugs like to do this. This is nice. We like this because it's very predictable. This is nonlinear kinetics. So what do you see with that?
Not directly proportional.
It is not directly proportional. So when you get out to the tail of that, what happens? Small changes result in what? Big changes in concentration. So they can have a linear portion, but then here you go. Okay. So this is called Michaelis-Menten or non-linear kinetics. So it usually goes to where you've got a capacity limited system. Do you all go to the post office anymore?
Yes.
Okay. At Christmas, there are 3 people processing packages, okay? If the number of people coming in the post office equals the rate at which those people can process packages, does a line form? No, because they get them out as soon as the next person comes in. What usually happens? They cannot process the packages as fast as the line is forming, so what happens? It accumulates. That's nonlinear kinetics, okay? So you got an enzyme capacity that is limited. Eventually, if you put when you reach that point of drug coming in, meets or exceeds, then that's when you get to this portion of the drug. Okay? It's important to know where that occurs with some drugs because toxicity goes way up when you get into the nonlinear portion. The most famous and classic drug for this is phenytoin, an anticonvulsant. At small doses, or small in this portion, you make a drug change, you get some effect, little. But when you saturate that capacity, then let's say a 2% change in drug leads to a 20% change in concentration. So if you're not aware of it, what happens is you're dosing the drug, you're not getting the concentration you want, and then you keep dosing it, and then all of a sudden, the person comes back ataxic and nystagmus because they can't walk. You've caused the toxicity now because the concentration has gotten so high. So if you saturate a capacity limit system, drug just accumulates, okay, until as the enzymes can chug through it. This is an important one to know. So we don't have that many drugs that are following nonlinear kinetics, thank goodness. So as we come through, we'll point those out as we go. But they are highly susceptible to toxicity if you aren't checking their blood levels or you are not aware of that type of kinetics. Questions? Good. All right. I frequently, we're going to put my hand down. So here's dilatin. So here is dosing, so here's 50 milligrams, here's 100 milligram, 150, you're not making any progress. Here's your therapeutic range. So your target range, this is the minimally effective range, and this is your toxicity. So you keep dosing it up to about 300 is pretty common, 350. But you go from 350 to 400 and look at the change that you get compared to going from here to here or here to here. Okay? So from 300 to 400, you're now almost in the toxic range. Okay, drug delivery systems. So we have tons of drug delivery systems, going to go through those. Some of them we've already talked about. We can use targeted delivery. We can use it to where we can get a drug right to a cancer cell and just affect a cancer cell. We have lots of controlled release that will deliver a drug exactly where we want it. We have now some steroid preparations that we can deliver down to the lower part of the colon for people who have ulcerative colitis. Most drugs won't make it that far because they'll be metabolized and absorbed, but the two drugs for Crohn's and for ulcerative colitis will get it. We can have some that will dissolve in the small intestines for Crohn's and in the large intestines for ulcerative colitis. Prodrugs are also an important concept. So prodrugs are drugs where we give an inactive drug. The drug will not do anything unless it's transformed into an active drug. Those are called prodrugs. We use them more and more. Clopidogrel, a antiplatelet agent, undergoes 2 transformations before it is active and then will exert an antiplatelet effect. So it's important to know a prodrug. Some drugs, like allopurinol, they have effect, but what we take advantage of is that it has a metabolite that is very long in action, and so we can dose it once a day instead of 4 or 5 times a day, which the drug would require. Okay? So an inactive drug is converted, methylprednisolone is one of those, to get it to, so your Madrigal dose pack, we converted prednisone to an active, more active form. Here's dosage forms. We're going to talk about these a lot. Do you all have, if they talk to you about getting Lexicomp or oh, what's the other thing you want to use? Hippocrates? No? Okay. So we'll talk about getting a program on your computer, not your computer, your phone, an app that you can get drug information. I'll ask if there's one that I want you to go with. Last year I just told the students which ones to get, and you can get free ones as a student. So they'll tell you in those, with the drug information, what kinds of dosage forms. So in terms of oral dosage forms, there's a ton of different types. You know tablets, you know capsules, you know sublingual tablets. There are lozenges, there are liquids, there are things called melts that you just, like Zofran comes in a melt. People that can't swallow tablets, that have either they're throwing up or they have a phobia with tablets, we can give them a melt. Kids, it's useful to use melts. Effervescent tablets usually are very quick active. If you want something that will have a very quick effect, we can use an effervescent tablet. Lots of types of liquids, elixirs, solutions, suspensions, drops. They have different vehicles, so the vehicle is what kind of carries everything. Alcohol is a common vehicle. Water is a vehicle. Oils are vehicles. They get you to where you want to go, but they're not necessarily the active ingredient. Okay, so that's oral. Questions about the oral agents? This picture just shows you different administration and the different organs that interact with it. Forgot why I put it in there. I liked it when I put it in there. Topical dosage form. So topical means it goes on the skin. So we've got ointments. We'll talk a lot about these when we get to derm and about the different vehicles because they make a big difference what you use depending on the lesion that you have. Ointments and creams, gels. Gels usually evaporate. They've got an alcohol base, so they will evaporate quickly. Paste usually will stay on very long, so will an ointment. Transdermal patches are transdermal. Dusting, so powders, different sizes of powders would fall into either dust or powders. Other topicals would be eye drops and ointments. We'll talk about those in the next, or in Module 3. Vaginal, intrauterine, or rectal. So we have suppositories, we have tablets, vaginal tablets. We have intrauterine devices that we use for contraception, rings that we use for contraception, films that are used for contraception as well. Creams that are used for replacement of hormones or also contraceptive products. These terms, I assume you've been exposed to already. IV, so you know what IV is. It goes right into the vein. Intradermal, where does it go? Right under the skin. So intradermal is that little wheel that they're doing there. Subcutaneous goes further, and you see the picture with the IV. The sub-Q goes under the dermis, and IM into the muscle. And then we have inhalation and inhalers. We have sprays, and we have injections. Questions? You made it. All right, I will see you tomorrow at 8. Bring your Pete and your geriatric handouts, and we'll start with those. Oh, I will bring those. Okay, thanks a lot.
I'm gonna go work on it. I'm gonna go walk. It's not like hard for guys.
I'm very sarcastic.
What? Yes. That's a total everywhere. Really? No. I feel like I've gotten the opposite impression. I feel like everyone else is like, I'm just rolling I'm rolling with it, but I'm not super excited about it. Like I'm like so understanding that. You know my favorite thing about the highlight is when you really like figure out, you like make it, you agree with it? Yeah, I can really. Yeah. I'm so used to doing that with now. That's exactly. I have to be really even if like I normally understand what they say, I never like that's exactly what it is. Yeah, if you highlight, but actually, well, I want to make sure glad I'm gonna do. But I like having these to I like anyway because all my pictures were shuffled around and on PDF they were so I would just do a copy. Do what? On paper? Just try it. So, and also stick to those symbol arrows and then they're showing up like